And if you think there is any chance of the British MSM holding Keir Starmer to account, then you only had to see the picture, one picture, which told a lot during that flight last night. There they are, the Fourth Estate, the same people like Pippa Carrera who hounded Boris Johnson and Liz Truss from office, laughing along with Sir Keir as if he's their best mate. Because guess what? He is their best mate. And this was no one-off. Look at the truly shameful conduct of the British Bashing Corporation's supposedly impartial political editor Chris Mason and Sky News' Beth Rigby during his first press conference.
A basic understanding of the rooms I've used so far here, and that's good, but there are plenty of hidden places I'm yet to discover.
Oh, they just love him, don't they? They are all in this together, just like Biden was with the American MSM, and look how that ended up. In fact, Caitlin Moran of the Times newspaper has even admitted to receiving some type of sexual pleasure from watching Keir Starmer take power. How weird is that? The reality is, and I'm not just saying this because of the launch of this show, but the independent media is the only thing that's going to keep this new government honest, because we have now seen the liberal media for what they really are. I mean, I knew what they really are, but they have truly shown their cards. I mean, come on. They claim to be interested in holding power to account, but in reality, they are only interested in holding those on the right in power to account. Unbelievably, the former BBC presenter turned hard leftist newsagents host Emily Maitlis believes that her priority after this election should be hounding the very polite Sir Jacob Rees Mogg, who she rudely hectored in yet another desperate bid to go viral.
This election is to move further to the right if the electorate has just told you they prefer the parties of the left.
Well, the parties of the right got 11 million votes. I think you're ignoring that. You were waiting patiently.
No, but you haven't answered. Sorry.
Patiently. I have answered the question. You just didn't like the answer. These two things are different.
So 11 million votes enough?
Sorry, I was about to talk to this lady.
Can we just go back to that? The question of ideology.
You've just done me.
I've done. Yeah, I know I've done you, but you've got the microphone.
Just, were you happy to see your
Hello,
moderate
this gentleman
colleagues?
now. Hello.
What can you tell us about this reality TV show?
But on that happy
Wait,
note,
Jacob,
I'm so sorry.
Don't trip. Extraordinary. Jacob Rees Mogg is sort of visibly, usually scrupulously polite. Today he was having very little of it. He didn't want to answer questions about the ideology of the party, about why he felt it was more important to take his party further to the right, given the message the electorate has just sent the Conservatives on Thursday. And he was very keen not to answer a single question today from the newsagents.
There is absolutely nothing extraordinary about that. And by the way, absolutely no reason why he should be polite to you, Ms. Maitlis. But I thought it was really important to show you that clip to absolutely illustrate, without any doubt, the complete crooked and biased nature of the mainstream media in this country. Ms. Maitlis said that he wasn't prepared to answer any question today from the newsagent. You just saw Jacob Rees Mogg answer her question. As he said, she just didn't agree with the answer. And the problem is, Ms. Maitlis, you're an activist, not a journalist. And it is a complete disgrace the BBC ever allowed you anywhere near their election coverage. Then there's the double standards between how the off-communists treat my former channel GB News compared to LBC, which I've now christened the Labour Broadcasting Company. Do you agree with me, by the way? I've been thinking a lot about this, that Carol Vorderman just gets more deranged by the day. Watch this.
Let's go through the list, shall we? Just have a good time. Make yourselves a cup of tea. Grant Shapps, gone. Tria's Coffee, gone. Penny Mordaunt, gone. Lucy Fraser, gone. Johnny Mercer, gone. Simon Hart, gone. David T.C. Davis over in Wales, gone. Gillian Keegan. Chichester didn't think that she'd done such a good job after all. Gone. Alex Chalk, gone. Liam Fox, gone. Jacob Rees Mogg, over and out. Michelle Donnellan and the £34,000 she made us pay for her libelling somebody, gone. Robert Buckland, gone. Simon Clarke, gone. Mark Harper, gone. Quite a few survived, of course, in their very safe seats. They'll now be fighting it out for who will be the next leader of the Tory party.
How on earth can that show be considered balance? But no one cares, certainly not the of communists, because she is parroting a hard left narrative. Hilariously, the new Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, yesterday declared the culture war was over in her first speech to her new department. Now, she said that with absolutely no understanding of the fact that it is the left that has spent years stoking the culture war, unless actually she was being purposefully intellectually dishonest. But I hope Ms. Nandy, given she's just declared the culture war over, will tell that to the BBC, which she's now responsible. Because remember, that's the BBC that rewrites British history, that prioritises extreme gender ideology over science, and that denigrates Brexit and Reform UK voters at every opportunity. And they were at it again last night, inviting some rude, unknown, hard left extremist onto Newsnight. Look,
have the same policy issues, and we should still be putting pressure on, and that's important. And I think also that I'm not sure if we should be taking advice from someone who crashed the economy in a few days of being in a job as a councillor.
I know you want to do all that political stuff. We're here to have a broad discussion. But thank you anyway for reminding me of that.
To be fair, Michaela can say whatever she wants. And as you can in response.
And I can say whatever I want in response.
And can Derek, you too.
The most hilarious thing to me is that these jokers don't even realise how out of touch and biased they are, because they live in a parallel universe. So I had to show you that by reading you out this unbelievable tweet by the Channel 4 news host Krishnan Guru-Murthy, who wrote, "The challenge for political broadcasting is enormous and rather satisfying to watch. After years of personality-driven and chaotic, shallow politics coverage across much of the media, which was largely about instability, gossip and leadership crises, we now have a government with massive majority, widespread internal agreement, and no likelihood of massive instability anytime soon. A great environment for a programme like Channel 4 News, full of policy nerds and people who'd prefer to argue about what ideas work, then who should be the front person?" I mean, there's so much to unpack there. Firstly, Krishnan Guru-Murthy has just admitted they've given up. Channel 4, despite being government-owned and apparently impartial, their main presenter has now just said, we're not even going to bother to challenge the Labour leadership because we agree with them. And then this idea that it was somehow the Conservative Party that was responsible for the chaos over the past few years is rubbish. It was the media, the mainstream media, people like Krishnan, who were responsible for Boris Johnson, a highly popular Prime Minister who was elected with an 80-seat majority, being defenestrated over a cake. And it was that same man, by the way, who called a Conservative minister the C word. So all I will say is thank God that we have the independent media and that the MSM will soon be finished. But now it's time for the uncancelled interview. And yesterday's boat arrivals carried 70 illegals in each vessel. So the Stamada, thank you so much, Sir Keir, as well and truly arriving to our shores. I'm delighted to be joined now by Reform UK's Howard Cox, who ran in the DL and Dover seat, running second in the end to the Labour Party, but putting up a very good fight. And Howard Cox, brilliant to have you on the show. You were completely across this issue after running in that constituency. And it seems almost inevitable, doesn't it? You warned about this. Under Starmer, the people smugglers are emboldened. There's no deterrent anymore, and there's no chance of a deterrent being introduced.
Hello, Dan. Yeah, thanks for being on your show. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I stood in Dover. I campaigned for about 4.5 weeks. The Labour guy was campaigning for 2.5 years. So if we had another month or so, I think I could have nicked it. That's the irony of this sort of thing. But you're dead right. I mean, they were waiting on the other side of the channel till the election result was. They were waiting for Labour, and look at them. They're coming in, and it's going to be an exponential growth of immigrants coming in. And, you know, the boats aren't going to be stopped by Labour. They're going to welcome them. They're going to open up more hotels for them. You just listen to Angela Rayner. Every single town and village is going to have to accommodate them. You cannot... This is Enid Blyton fiction, you'd think. But it's not. It's the truth. We are going to be inundated with more and more immigrants.
I know. And the crazy thing is that the National Crime Agency, Howard, has already said the Labour plan ain't going to work. This idea that you can target the people smuggling gangs is not going to work, Sir Keir, because they are not centralised. They're nimble.
Well, this is the point. It's like drug smugglers. We've had, the problems of drugs in this country have been growing for years and years. And the NCA and the police and Europol, Interpol, all of the international agencies have been trying to stop these gangs, and they've failed. It's as simple as that. And Dan, you got it spot on. They're mobile. They move around from position to position. I actually spoke about, I think it's 3 days before the election, to an border control director or manager, and he told me in no way you can stop them unless you stop them on the beaches. Now, we've given £500 million to Macron, and what's he done with that money? We should have been setting up places where we can actually process these people on the beaches of France, but that hasn't happened. All they've done is actually escort them over for our border control to bring them over here. It just beggars belief. And Starmer is in cloud cuckoo land, as is Yvette Cooper. They've got no chance of stopping them. There are going to be more and more coming. And that Reform is the only one that's saying that we should stop them, put them back in their boats and escort them back to France. No one's tried that yet. No one's tried it. Let's do it.
No, and I have been saying for years, as has Nigel Farage, of course, both of us on our GB News shows, that this is a national emergency. Yes. And that a turnback policy, I mean, I was also in favour of the deterrent, by the way, but a turnback policy is utterly essential because it's how Australia managed to stop the boats virtually overnight. Within 1 year, Australia stopped the boats.
Absolutely right. In fact, with that particular person I was talking for Border Force, he actually brought along a person from Australia who was over here working actually with private organisations on other issues, particularly on terrorist crime. But he was involved with that issue, which has stopped the boats coming into Australia. Yes, it was a bigger gap. They had to have proper boats. They couldn't do it in a dinghy going across 1,000 miles of water. That's true. But the way he suggested it is very simple. About half of the actual immigrants coming along to the beach hadn't paid their money to the smugglers yet. They were on the beach. So the best thing to do is, this is so clever and simple, is simply say to them, you don't have to pay £3,000. Pay us £150 for a UK visa, yes, but we'll take you to a nice island off the Scilly Islands. Or off the Orkneys or something, right off in places they wouldn't come across the channel. And once that particular process, that would be the deterrent. Dan, that's the sort of thing. I wasn't a great fan of Rwanda simply because of the cost of the flipping thing, but at least it was some sort of deterrent. And guess what? Keir Starmer on his first day comes into office and says, that's it, dead and buried. And look, we got more coming in now, and it's going to grow exponentially. You watch, you mark my words.
Well, he will rue that decision. Because let me tell you, Howard Cox, and I want to speak about Reform UK and what it's been like for you to be part of this growing movement. But let me tell you, and some people might say I'm crazy, but let's see in 5 years' time. I believe, Howard, this is going to be a one-term Labour government. I think this invasion and the absolute unnecessary increase in legal immigration too, which is literally killing this country, and it's killing our public services, and it's killing our housing. I think it's going to be so out of control under Labour that in 5 years' time, that are going to be out. And that's where I think Reform UK, and I really do believe this, could end up being in government in 5 years' time, because you were second place in so many seats, nearly 100, after, as you say, literally a matter of weeks campaigning. Now that there's the Fantastic Five in Parliament, there's a chance to campaign for the next 5 years, especially on this issue. And there's also the chance, Howard, and I know right now you'll probably say you don't want it, but there's also the chance for a potential deal with a reformed Conservative Party. I'm not even necessarily talking about a merge, but perhaps some sort of electoral pact where the Conservative Party runs in areas where they may be more challenged by the Liberal Democrats, and Reform runs in the red wall and the seats that you're trying to take from Labour. What do you reckon?
Well, I think you're very astute on this factor. We've all heard Nigel says he wants to lead a centre-right party. That could be some sort of coalition, but Nigel must be running it. That's the point. We can't have a wet Conservative, certainly. And let's face it, they've got 121 seats. And you look at the quality of the actual candidates that are going to lead the so-called Conservative Party. They're Conservative in that name only, as we all know. That's the reason why. It's the only thing I agree with George Galloway in life is, it's the two backsides of the same issue. We've got no difference at the moment. In Parliament, we've got a leftish, House of Commons now, and that we haven't got any right-speaking area except with Reform UK. But Nigel is biding his time. He's promised to be in for 5 to 6 years. One reason why I actually happy to be Reform and stand as an MP was Nigel asked me, but also the fact he came along and said he's going to be in it for 5 to 6 years. And
it was a game changer.
It absolutely was.
Okay, but so I just want to dig down a little bit more on the specifics, though. So you think that there potentially could be a deal or a merge, but, and this is going to be a big but, and it's going to be a bitter pill probably for the Conservatives to swallow, and maybe an impossible pill for them to swallow. You say Nigel Farage would have to be the leader of the movement. He wouldn't come in as, say, a deputy behind a Kemi Badenoch, for example.
Dan, you're absolutely right. The guy, we've got 4 million votes. That's what we got, and we got 5 seats. As we know, Lib Dems got less than us, and they got 71, 72 seats. And we got also 5 Palestinian sympathisers who got less, the same. Those sorts of things are happening. Nigel is the only one that talks common sense. He's in touch with the grassroots. He's not rattled by interviews with the mainstream media. He puts the arguments across succinctly, and he answers the questions. No other politician can do that. I've got nothing but respect for him. I've been working with him for about 10 years because, I run a campaign called Fair Fuel UK.
Yes.
And we stopped fuel duty rising. And I worked with some good backbench Tory MPs, but most of them were Eurosceptics. They were Brexiteers. They were good people like that. And they're in touch with real people. There are 37 million drivers in this country. And I promise you, I'll be telling them they should be voting Reform over the next 2 or 3 years, because I think that this Parliament won't last 5 years.
Oh, God, I hope you're right, Howard. Seriously, I hope you're right, because 5 years of this. I mean, look how mad it's been over the first couple of days. I mean, 5 years of it, I can't stomach it. So I really hope you're right on that. And I agree with you, by the way. I mean, Nigel is the most influential politician of his generation. He's done more than virtually any other major leader. And, I mean, come on. You put him up on a stage and compare him to Kemi Badenoch or Tom Tugendhat or Victoria Atkins, he blows them out the water.
Well, absolutely right. I saw him actually being interviewed recently by Beth Rigby, and he actually took her apart. And all he said, he just answered the questions, and she kept trying to get some soundbite she could use, that in case he slipped up. But he doesn't slip up because he knows the fact. He's so well informed. I'm so impressed with how he's actually delivered this. But we mustn't forget people like Richard Tice, who's been running Reform.
Oh, I know.
These sorts of people, and he's a lot of his own money as well, but he's good. And you've got great things in Rupert Lowe and of course Lee Anderson. This is a great base to build on, and I'm probably going to be standing again in 4 or 5 years' time, even at my tender years I'm 70 now, but I think I'm probably going to do that. It's simply because of the promise of Nigel being Prime Minister.
Yeah, and I think it will happen. Actually, I really do. I mean, look at the Marine Le Pen movement in France. I think it will happen. And by the way, I should stress that isn't me saying that Nigel is an identikit type of politician to Marine Le Pen. They disagree on a lot of issues, particularly economically. So, Howard, you, of course, also ran for Reform UK in the London mayoral election too. Have you seen the change within the party between that campaign and the general election? Because it seems to very quickly have professionalised and build this movement, and its social media is so much more popular than any other party. Something really changed over the past few weeks.
Well, obviously Nigel was driving it behind the scenes, and he announced his candidature. He became leader and candidature in Clacton. Those sorts of things are a great stimulus. But we are, as you quite rightly said, we had 98 of our candidates came second, mainly to Labour, right across the country. And we're going to go for Labour. In terms of we're going to be setting up a branch system now. We had hardly any money, hardly any resources, and hardly any time. And look what we've achieved already.
Oh, I know. I actually think it's been very, very impressive. What do you make of the mainstream media coverage of Reform UK, Howard? Because they want to suggest that you're racist, that you're homophobic, that you're, some sort of Holocaust denier. I mean, what Reform UK... I mean, actually, they even now want to suggest that you don't exist. That they're making up these ridiculous claims that the Reform UK candidates were made up individuals. I mean, what happened to the media? Why did they decide to effectively campaign against Reform UK? Is it just their hatred of Nigel Farage or Brexiteers?
In London.
What happened?
What happened was all the hustings, they invited the four so-called main parties, partly because they did have some people on the London Assembly already, and that's what they based it on. Because we didn't have any Assembly members for Reform UK, I didn't qualify. So the LBC, ITV, Sky and BBC refused to have me on. And at that point, we were about third in the polls, in front of the Lib Dems and the Greens, but we weren't allowed, or I wasn't allowed to. I never expected to win the mayor, because London is a completely different country to the rest of the country.
Yes, tell me about it.
Exactly, and that point of view. But what we wanted is to get 3 or 4 people on the Assembly. We've got one on there, which I'm delighted with, Alex Wilson, good guy. But the fact is, it stinks.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.